But in order to make it a good research facility, it needs to be more hypothesis-driven. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem with this whole discussion, is the management plan was too silvicultural. The land allocation plan was too rigid, and the research plan was too nebulous. But it's how do you achieve the really outstanding world-class research is the trick here. And can you have your cake and eat it too? And still have confidence about what that landscape is pretty much going to be functioning as 50 years, 100 years from now. I think you can, but you have to blend the two.
Thank you.
I don't want to sound apologetic for the research proposal, but I do want to hone in on your point, because I agree with it. It is too nebulous, and this workshop has probably spent as much time as the committee has on this topic, so we're still very early on in its development. What I want to know is how would we make it more focused? How would we remove some of that nebulousness to get it honed in on specifically what we should be doing?
Kate, answer that with your models. Yeah. There you go. That's the answer, I think.
Do you want me to do that?
Yeah.
Please.
We were chatting over the break here about an approach that you might get everything you want. Everything. My impression was we got almost everything on the list. So let's go back a little bit to the discussion yesterday. We were talking about, we'll go back to John. I want to achieve what John wanted. He wanted to understand redwood ecosystems. This is what makes excellent research. And management, cutting trees and plots doesn't make for it's great science, but it's not the kind of world-class kind of, wow. Okay, so let's see if we can get both, everything. What if you framed that the Jackson Forest and its relationship to universities was going to become world-class? When I say world-class, you usually have to center on an expertise that you're going to get really good at. You're going to be a center of excellence, okay? And you could focus that around habitat structural relationships and wildlife use, the ecological use. Let's make it as broad as we can. So we'll go back to the model discussion yesterday. You would make your models. You're going to center on making those kinds of models, and that's going to be, in fact, that people could do that and prove that they work and explained where animals and all kinds of ecology was and how it worked. That would be world class. That would attract worldwide attention if you could do that, and especially if you could do it at a landscape scale. You would formulate these models around the structure on the landscape. So, for example, one might look like on a forest stand. You'd have to have some information on here's what's on the ground, and here's kind of what's in the middle layers and the top layers and whatever. And you would have a discipline to how you build those models, because you want them eventually to tie to forest inventories. Because what you're going to aim at is predicting at the landscape scale what animals can be there, given the habitats. And in fact, if you're really good at this, you could change a stand and predict accurately what was going to happen to the ecology. Okay? So that's the center, the science center of things. So what you would do in an overall view is you would take what you have out there today, and you have whatever's distributed out there, and the first task you would do is you would build the models using the diversity you have out there today. You would learn, what structural things and where are the animals. So you'd put a lot of effort into inventorying both the animals and the stand structures. And then you would use the second phase to send all the stands that are out there today on a trajectory. Now, this is where it fits with the allocation models, because some stands can go to old growth and stay there. Everybody, you can have a zero trajectory, or you can be sent towards the trajectory of an old growth stand. You could be sent to the trajectory of, hey, we think this sort of open thing with a few stands out here is actually really good for these critters. You could go in any direction. You could go down to clear cutting if that's a good model to test the models. And so every time you did a stand manipulation, you had a hypothesis. And you could work within the constraints. You could put the allocation constraints saying we want a lot of the landscape to be in the old, but we're flexible as to what's in there, kind of thing. And by doing that, you could have an allocation, at the same time you could have a hypothesis. Now the second model I would do, I realized I think we introduced some confusion yesterday when we said put the watersheds in there, make that a stand. I thought about that later and I thought, you know, there's not enough land out there to really constrain everything that way. So how about you separate the fish and also devote a center of excellence to really understanding coho use of the watershed as a whole. And attach the riparian forests to the stream, separate them from the other model, and drive to restoration of the coho habitat as fast as possible. And get really good at fish in the watershed. I don't think you're good at fish in the watershed right now. It's not a place I look to for knowledge from that. But do a lot of fish work. Where are they using it? Test all of the things that are in the new forest practice rules that people thought would be neat, but with the goal to get the streams in as good a health as possible, as fast, and if you have to manage it, do it. Put wood in. You can do some riparian old structure, but don't designate them to be riparian old structure necessarily. That's part of the experiment. Get them and see if you can recover the species. See if you can understand the habitat use. So parallel the fish work with the other work, but separate it. And so you'd have two centers of excellence. But they're not conflicting. They actually kind of go together. But let the stream people manage the stream side forest. And do the upland forests differently. But if you focus on habitat, we're going to be habitat modelers predicting the ecological values. You could then have what the scientists want, which is a hypothesis that everything you do, and then you could produce managed riparian models and landscape models that could then be transported to the rest of the community on how to work off of stand inventories to make broader sets. That would be one of your products in the middle term. And in the early term, you would get a whole bunch of coho restoration.